Porsche made it closer than anyone was expecting, but Toyota still took a 1-2 in the 6 hours of Fuji as Mike Conway, Kamui Kobayashi, and Jose Maria Lopez took their fourth win of the season. Lawrence Vantor took the lead with a bold move at the start, and Porsche number 6 managed to hold on to it for nearly 4 hours before Toyota regained control of the race. As car 8 fell away with issues near the end, Kobayashi pulled clear to take victory by 39 seconds, setting the fastest lap on his way. The Porsche held on to third, with Ferrari finishing fourth and fifth, meaning that Toyota won the Manufacturers' World Championship with a race to spare. Toyota had the quickest car this weekend, but as the old saying goes, catching is one thing, passing is another. And in the end it took a bold dive by Ryo Hirakawa at turn 10 to finally pass the Porsche. Despite getting mugged in a messy start, Toyota never truly lost control of the race and pounced around the fourth round of stops. The crew of Car 7 have cut the championship lead down to 15 points, but a second place here means another P2 in Bahrain will be enough for Sebastian Buemi, Brendan Hartley and Hirakawa to secure back-to-back world championships. Their Manufacturers' Championship win is well deserved. It's fair to say after a few years of limited opposition, people had forgotten just how good Toyota were, and I don't recall anyone predicting them to win 5 from 6. Outside of Le Mans and the interesting BOP we had that weekend, they've been the quickest at every round, the most reliable, and made the least mistakes. Porsche Penske can be extremely happy after by far their best run in hypercar to date, actively challenging for the win for the first time as they secured just their second podium of the season. The team's only mistake, and it's quite the blunder, was not fueling the car properly before the start, but they recovered that thanks to some fuel saving and came home just 9 seconds off second place. The sister number 5 didn't have such a good race. A lap 1 puncture put them out of contention before an extreme penalty for a safety car regs breach and then power steering failure. What's most impressive is how well Porsche were able to turn themselves around this weekend after a difficult patch of form. They went from slow on the straights at Monza to strong in a straight line this weekend. If they can back this performance up in Bahrain, Porsche Penske can be optimistic of fighting for the title in 2024. Ferrari failed to finish on the podium for the first time all season, but a consistent run to 4th and 5th means both cars still have an outside shot at the Drivers' Championship. Fuji was the first track all year they haven't tested at before the event, and it showed, with them outside the top 2 quickest cars on pace for the first time this season. Not for the first time this year, the crew of Car 51 have been vocal about the lack of a driver weight rule, something that definitely disadvantages them and the organisers are surely looking into. Hertz Team Jota had a solid run to 6th, and it could have been much better were it not for 2 key mistakes. Antonio Felix da Costa picked up a drive-through after contact with the team's LMP2 car, and they made the mistake of attempting to double stint their left side tyres near the start of the race, which didn't work out. Peugeot Total Energies struggled, but a reliable run saw Car 94 finish 7th, whilst Car 93's only blip on the way to 8th was contact with a GTE car. They just couldn't get to grips with Sector 3, no doubt hindered by having smaller rear tyres than all of their rivals in a rear limited part of the track. Stoffel Vandoorne's hypercar debut was a success, with him actually the quickest of all 6 Peugeot drivers in the race, and I hope we see him in the WEC paddock more often next season. Proton competition were looking very strong in the early going, before a freak seatbelt failure at the second round of stops took them out of contention. I'm sure Porsche are going to have to be doing a lot of looking into this over the next couple of weeks. They recovered to 9th for their first WEC finish, and with strong pace can look to make another step forward in Bahrain. Cadillac Racing finished 10th for the second race in a row, as they again end up very disappointed. They were the only team to try the double stint early on, before any hopes of a comeback were ended when a wheel sheared off. Any hopes of the title is now gone, and they'll be looking to rebound with a return to the podium fight in Bahrain. And Floyd Vanwell Racing Team were looking good for their first point since Sebring, until a leak with an hour to go saw them fall behind the delayed Proton Porsche and Cadillac. It's a case of getting to the end of the year for the Bicolors team now, when they'll be able to develop and re-homologate their car. Engine cooling issues means they can't run their Gibson V8 at full power, putting them at a clear deficit to their rivals, but they were still able to stay ahead of all the LMP2s for the majority of Sunday. One thing I hope is fixed in the future is what happened at the start, when due to qualifying slower than the top LMP2, the Vanwall had to start from 13th overall, putting them at a huge disadvantage when Philippe Albuquerque dropped back a few seconds to give himself a clean run at turn 1. The bigger problem here is the track in qualifying was declared wet, and had the rain picked up in hypercar just a few minutes earlier, chances are all of the hypercars would have been mixed in with the LMP2s. Separate sessions should mean they line up class by class, especially when some of them are declared wet. Team WRT took the win in LMP2 as Rui Andrade, Louis Delatraz and Robert Kubica made a huge jump towards winning the title in Bahrain, as they became the first crew to win twice this season. The stars of the show late on were Philippe Albuquerque in the 22 United and Robin Freitz in the 31 WRT, as they fought over second place with Albuquerque coming out on top. United's 23 was fourth from the 36 Alpine, with last time's winners Jota rounding out the top 6. Inter Europol's hopes of an upset title took a huge blow this weekend, as they picked up just 2 points for a 9th place finish after struggling for pace. They go to Bahrain in a must-win scenario, 33 points back, with United's 22 car the last one still in contention after Albuquerque's final stint charge from 4th to 2nd kept them in the game. One thing I'd like to take a minute to highlight is the 36 crew, who took their 3rd consecutive top 5 finish. The difference between the first 3 races and their form since Le Mans has been night and day, and Alpine deserve plaudits for a successful turnaround after an underwhelming start to the year. And it was a first win in 6 years for Francesco Castellacci, Thomas Floor and the 54 AF Corsa Ferrari and GTM, as they beat Corvette Racing and Kessel Racing, with the Iron Dames leading home Project 1AO and Dempsey Proton in a Porsche 456. The 33 Corvette was the quickest car this weekend, but lost out after what I would class as a harsh penalty for contact with, ironically, the 54, which at this point in time was a lap behind. Following some excellent fuel saving from Ben Keating and then Nico Verone, they were the only ones to be able to pull off the 4-stop strategy, and came home just 23 seconds down. But don't let that take away from what was a perfect drive by the 54, who didn't put a foot wrong all day. If you wanted proof as to how dominant Corvette Racing have been this year, with 1 races to go they have double the championship points of everyone else, and a win in Bahrain would leave them setting the record for the most points ever scored in a GTM season, despite the introduction of success ballast a couple of years ago and us only having 7 races, compared to the 9 we've seen in the past. Behind them, 7 cars can still finish second, the Iron Dames leading the way in what is sure to be an incredible fight. Kessel Racing, who are Italian flagged, but this is very much a home race for the team, with its all-Japanese crew and car guide branding, thought they had finished second, but were given a late post-race penalty for being one of several cars to speed under a full-course yellow to retrieve debris. A very clean race. The only other introduction was a lap 1 safety car after a spin by Louis Perez Companc aboard the 83 Richard Mille AF Corsa Ferrari. Disappointment of the weekend has to be ORT by TF, who ended up last after receiving 4 penalties for track limits. Aston Martin now have just 1 shot at stopping them going winless in GTM for the first time since 2012, when they only contested 2 races. but with how good Corvette are looking and how close the scrap behind them is, it's not going to be easy. This weekend's LMGT Yam race was really solid, but down to how good the other classes were, TV coverage couldn't do it justice. With its 3 AM start time in Europe, Fuji is the biggest test for TV, as many people will be watching the race delayed and therefore can't rely on live timing and social media to help keep them up to date with the race. The big thing which needs to change for me is the return of the constant rolling ticker showing the overall order. So even when the cameras are on Hypercar, you can always see how your favourite P2 or GT team is doing. We also saw several graphics showing virtual points, and some captions on these explaining what they show wouldn't have gone amiss. Let people know that the gap between Toyota and Ferrari meant that Toyota were on track to seal the manufacturer's title today. My last thing relates solely to FIA WEC TV, which saw a huge update for this year. The biggest problem for watching a race back is the chat automatically pops up when you enter a session. So if anyone has talked about the results. The other issues are you get a blackout period when you can't re-watch for around 30 minutes after the broadcast ends, which in the past was solved by uploading the race hour by hour instead of all in one block. And having the latest news at the bottom of the page means you're only one missed scroll away from seeing who wins. Who impressed you the most at Fuji? And who do you think will become world champions in Bahrain? Please let me know in the comments below. And whilst you're down there, why not press that like button and subscribe to the channel? It really helps me out.